son, where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. Oh, yeah. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
All right, folks, welcome back. It is once again the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Those things really do help out the channel. Today, I'm super excited to be speaking with filmmaker, writer, director, and producer, Michael Moshe Dahan. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So
Love the crowd.
Yeah, you know, the crowd went wild.
I like that the people are clapping. Already.
Yeah, they're super excited. We're definitely here to talk today about your movie, Yes, Repeat, No. But I just want to make sure we give at least a few moments for you to kind of give a contextual background of who you are, what you do, and how you got into filmmaking in general. And then we can get into
yeah, absolutely.
projects.
I mean, I've lived in Los Angeles, which is, kind of where I do most of my work for probably about 30 years. So the first 10 years I was out here, I was a film executive working for, large companies who make films for studios. I got to work on some amazing projects. Had a producing credit on a film called The Patriot starring Mel Gibson. So really large, historical epics, big studio films. And part of my frustration at that time in life was I wanted to be a little more involved. So I went back to school, studied fine art, studied photography, studied more filmmaking. I'd already studied it for a while. And then spent about another decade or so as a photographer and retoucher shooting commercial stuff, a lot of music, entertainment, celebrity stuff, retouching a lot of, kind of advertising stuff. And again, kind of wanted to push myself a little more in terms of the kind of work that I was doing. And I went back to grad school and, got an MFA in art. So I was always interested in kind of film and filmmaking, but in very different ways, conventionally, but also experimentally. And the practice that I kind of ended up with, is really a hybrid, right? Because, when I was in grad school, I, worked on a PhD for a good long time, but kind of was frustrated by the fact that I'd end up writing something that maybe a few dozen or 100 people would have eventually read. And I was a little, the film business for me, I wanted to be making more challenging work than what was available to be able to do as a filmmaker at that time, and even as a film producer. So I kind of exist in between academia, the film business, filmmaking, and I'm trying to mine ideas that are a little more challenging than I think what you'd conventionally be able to pursue just in a straight kind of mainstream film practice, and also expose complicated, contradictory, difficult ideas to an audience that otherwise wouldn't be exposed to it because, it's usually in academic circles that stuff is really developed. So I kind of exist as this hybrid because I want to make interesting work, but I want people to see it. I want people to have conversations about difficult things that they wouldn't otherwise get in, a historical epic. That stuff was incredibly satisfying for me, but it didn't, I didn't feel like I was challenged. And I like movies that don't offer a lot of answers, and those are the kinds of things that I want to make. So that's kind of how I ended up here. I was working on a PhD and decided to abandon it, and instead of doing a dissertation, decided to make a feature film. And that's kind of how we ended up with the project that we're here to talk about. It's a really culmination of all these different things that I've done.
Would you say there are any elements? I guess let me break this up into multiple questions here. What things about producing or the more administrative side of running a film, what of those things did you enjoy?
Well, I love being able to have a project that spans a few years that you completely throw yourself into on every level creatively. I think that, I love knowing how this stuff is going to be put together. Of course, I had help. I had two amazing producers that were much more capable at the actual producing, but because I had done it enough times, I knew that I wanted to take my vision from beginning to end. So the problem solving part of it is really interesting to me. Every day is a new problem, a new challenge. Every hour on set, there's something you have to, we rented a stage that isn't actually soundproof. Like, what are we going to do?
Sure, exactly.
We got a great deal on this stage and we didn't know why. And now we do. So stuff like that. And that happened a lot, during this film where it was like, oh, right. So we can hear everything that's going on outside. What do we do about that? The problem solving, the creative problem solving, the challenges of, losing an actor 2 days into the production or the night before. All those kinds of things are kind of thrilling to me because I'm really interested in the process. And because it's not a conventional film, things that happen that are accidents or unfortunate, events like somebody leaving a film, they become, if you're process based, it just becomes part of the process, right? So it becomes part of the film. And that's the ethos that we have, which I kind of don't ever want to go back to anything else, right?
Sure.
Make everything that happens part of the experience of the filmmaking. And that was a little bit liberating, to be honest, because then if things happen, you're like, okay, well, we're shooting it and it's part of the film. So now it's just part of the film, right? It's not a mistake. It's just now a thing we're dealing with as a problem to solve.
Well, I've talked about this ad nauseum. I've had a lot of people on my show who do all sorts of types of creative endeavors. And there's like this thread that everyone kind of follows. It's like there's some perfection in the imperfections, right? And like the imperfections of a project are kind of what make it special and unique and a story that you could then at some point go back and like relive a snapshot of your life in.
Yeah, of course. I mean, letting go of the perfection probably took me 30 years and it's
still
great.
Working on it. Yeah, sure.
I'm still working on it, but I'm saying letting go of trying to have it be perfect is something that I had to learn and is incredibly liberating because, nobody sees how close to your perfect the movie ends up being. They just see what it is. And I think not holding on so tightly is a real life lesson as a creator. It's taken me a long time to figure that out, but I have to say now that I've figured it out, I don't want to work any other way because I think it allows people to do things that are surprising. Otherwise, being too perfect, I think, eliminates surprise. And that's what brings some of the best stuff I've been involved with has happened in the moment, something you didn't expect. And so, to be honest, trying to craft this movie as an experience for people was about trying to craft a situation where surprises could happen, right? No maximum number of surprises, which I think
Love that.
Shooting multiple cameras all the time, shooting, I don't know, 4 cameras, 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day continuously, no matter what happened, from every angle. So we could have all the coverage done, allowed for that because then people could we didn't have to worry about like, oh no, we're going to see a camera. Okay, let's just see all the cameras and let's just go with it. And I think that kind of stuff, opens up a lot of possibilities for people. You're not worried about silly things that you have to worry about in filmmaking. Eyeline matches and,
Well, it's funny you're going to say that because there's one shot in the movie where you pan past a mirror and I didn't see a camera. And I was like, in a room full of cameras,
how did we do that? Yeah. I mean, some of it was thought out and some of it was just like, give me a bunch of track and a bunch of cameras. And, I gave the actors cameras. I had a camera crew following me interacting with the other camera crew, right? There was a camera crew that was just shooting me and the other 2 producers in our interactions. And then there were times where I gave the actors cameras and said, look, shoot yourselves, shoot everything, go in the green room and shoot. And they were like, we don't want to shoot in the green room. Like that's our private space. We kind of just need a little bit of because, they're standing on a revolving stage for 10 hours a day, rotating while there are cameras on every side of them. And so it's almost endless for them how, being filmed. Because again, it was 4 cameras going continuously for, I guess at least 6 to 7 hours a day after we did hair and makeup. So, before we started this project, the conversations I had with the camera department, which the actors were aware of, but it was like, listen, if we call cut and stop shooting, you don't stop shooting. That's just for us to have conversations, sometimes arguments. I mean, of course, there's going to be arguments. This is the most arguable topic on earth.
Sure.
And so if we're going to argue about it, please don't stop shooting. Like, let's get the arguments, and let's at least create an environment where everybody feels safe having arguments. And then we'll worry about it. We'll worry about what the film is after the fact. I mean, we had 10 days of shooting and 260 hours of footage between 4 cameras.
Jeez.
So
in your mind, like, as somebody who's gone from like executive level on major motion pictures to somebody who's producing films, creating from inception films, what do you enjoy the most? Do you have to, like, in your own brain switch from role to role, or is it just very seamless for you because you have this broad reaching understanding of the whole process?
I think of it as an artist. I mean, when I'm working as an artist and making works for exhibition, I might have people helping here and there, but really I have to think of everything. It's like, how are we going to install the projectors? And I'm working with people who have expertise, but the part I enjoy most about the practice of being an artist, which is a little bit different than being a filmmaker, but it's what I bring into filmmaking, is having a vision that very often a lot of other people don't understand in the beginning, and thinking through exactly how I'm going to get it there, and working through the process of executing that by working with other people who bring something to it. And, very often they will derail my, trajectory or what I thought it would be, but always in a really healthy way. At least now that I'm a little bit more open to involving accidents, I see it that way. I'm much more open to hearing people say, "What have you thought about it like this? Have you thought about it like that?" So I argue with my producers all the time. It's like that's the argument is what gets us to an answer that we both think is better. So that part, I enjoy having this vision of something and bringing that to fruition, and having my hands in almost every part of it, with great collaborators, right? I'm not saying I do it all myself. I'm just saying, like, I feel like I'm carrying the vision, and having it kind of fed through collaborators, that I'm very lucky to work with, because they're all much smarter than I am about their particular discipline. And so I can just say, what we want? I want a revolving stage, right? We're on the sound stage, and I want to be able to do walk and talks. I want people walking across. I want people walking together, having conversations as though they're walking. How do we create that? So, I have people who will give me ideas of how to build it, or just then it's like, oh, well, let's just rent it because it's a lot cheaper. So I enjoy that part of it. Kind of maintaining the flame of the vision, and seeing it evolve. And sometimes that takes years. I mean, it takes, sometimes more than that. It's like this movie took, years and years from its initial, I mean, I could say that there was 7 years of dissertation research that got me to a place where I was even ready to, dare to write a script about this. Yeah. I mean, just to, the subject, when I realized what the film was, after not being able to put together a kind of gallery exhibition that I was supposed to curate as part of, graduate work between Palestinian artists and Israeli artists, right? Because they didn't want to come together in a room, which understandably, they had their issues about it. I had to think about, like, how do you make a film about this, and what is worth the effort of making a film? Because it's just a lot of damn work. So, when I finally came to something that I was like, oh, I have to make this. There's no way to not make this film. Sometimes it's like stepping in dog poop. You look at your bottom of your shoe and you're like, oh man, I got to make this film. I can't not make this film. Yeah. That's the level of commitment I need to have to undertake filmmaking, which is, can be excruciating in terms of the amount of effort and work and detail. So to feel like I had something worth it was both fantastic, but also like, okay, here we go. Right.
So there's a lot of questions and perspectives that I want to get about the film itself, but for the context for people that haven't seen it, can you explain what this story is about and how you chose to go about presenting this story?
Yeah, I mean, on the very kind of denotative level, it's about a real human being, a biographical figure named Juliano Mer-Khamis, who was himself an actor, and also became an activist. But the thing that drew me to him as a cultural figure, right, was that his mother was a Palestinian. Oh no, his mother was Jewish, and an activist. In fact, he ended up making a documentary about her called Arna's Children. And his father was Palestinian Christian, right? So his mother's Jewish, his father's Palestinian Christian. He is the divide. Right. He lives the divide. And, he kind of, represented a lot of what I thought was really interesting about this situation, which obviously to me has biographical significance. I was born in Israel, was raised in Jerusalem. So I saw him as a kind of, an interesting allegory for something that was much larger, right? And I was always very hesitant to make work about Palestine and Israel, because how do you make something that isn't flat-footed and didactic and lectures people on what to think? And so I wanted, this became this really interesting subject matter, because here's this human being, Juliano Mer-Khamis, who's an actor, as an Israeli, as a young man, as an Israeli, was a soldier in the IDF, right? Becomes an activist, after his kind of major acting career, which involves being in some Hollywood movies, being in a lot of Israeli films, Vamos Gitai, doing some big budget Hollywood stuff where he's either a background player or, a minor role, and then becomes an activist and uses the acting to kind of support the activism, launches a theater in Jenin as a way of, letting the community kind of find other ways to express themselves culturally, the Palestinian community, and it's working with Palestinian youth, putting up theater shows as a form of activism, right? Cultural activism. And I find this video of him on the internet, a clip where he says, he kind of predicts or foreshadows his death and says, I'll tell you how I'm going to die. A Palestinian is going to walk up to me and shoot me. And then I saw that something like that happened, years later. Again, it's unknown whether it was Palestinian or Israeli. There are a lot of theories about, was he by Israelis who thought he was collaborating with Palestinians? Was he by Palestinians who were afraid he was a spy for Israel? It's inconclusive. Lots of ink has been written about this, right? But the fact that, he foreshadows it and then it happens, to me was like, as a cigar chomping movie executive, I was like, there's something there. Right? Like I smell something.
It's a fascinating story. Yeah. In itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that becomes, this is the person we're going to do. So what are we going to do that's not going to be so heavy handed that it turns people off? And I think what was interesting to me is that he was, there was a period in his life where, he's Israeli, he's in the IDF, he's kind of, proud of his heritage. Then there's a period of his life where he's identifying as kind of a Palestinian. He has this privilege where he can kind of code switch and go between, Jenin or Tel Aviv. So it's a bit of a privilege that he can even do that. But I thought, okay, well, what if you try to, take these kind of facets of his personality and make a character out of each one. And so what would be the premise that you could do that with? And I thought, okay, well, what about if we're having an audition and they're kind of competing to justify, well, is the Palestinian the part of him that is more important? Is the Israeli the part of him that's more important? Is the part that is kind of mediating those two, himself as a public figure, is that more important? And I thought, okay, well, now we're talking about actors trying to book a role, and we're kind of away from the, these bigger ideas, and now we know what people are in conflict about. Because again, what am I going to have people come in and spout, their own opinions and theories about the Intifada or the occupation, etc. Right? I just think I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. I wanted to create some real drama between human beings, and so the premise of the film becomes these three actors who show up to audition for the part of Juliano Mer-Khamis, but one of them is Israeli, one of them is Palestinian, one of them is a kind of mediation of those two. We call him the public Juliano, and they're kind of competing. Which one is the right Juliano? They're having a bigger conversation. It's like, what is the who is the kind of chosen population in this conversation, right? So they're talking about acting parts, but they're also talking about, like, what does it actually mean to be a human being? How do you identify yourself? Which identity are you performing at what time? Is it the Israeli, the Palestinian? Which one is the valid one? I mean, of course, we know that we're all composed of many different versions of ourselves, but I thought it was an interesting technique to have them arguing about which Juliano is the right Juliano. And in a way saying like, well, which lineage is the rightest lineage? Are we talking about, the Christian God? Are we talking about the Jewish God? Are we talking the Muslim prophets? Right? Which one is the one that's valid? And so this little conversation about an acting part starts to kind of unravel. It's impossible for them to avoid all of these things that we know are kind of behind the scenes, which is how you define yourself as an individual. I think that part of it, how we can construct our own identities, has always been really interesting to me. All right. So they're competing for a part. That's the kind of long answer of just saying, that's what happens in the film.
Well, no, that was a great explanation. And again, like I love multi-layered stuff. I'm not necessarily a person who can just watch a movie where everything is told to me. I have to be challenged in a way to think. And there are so many meta layers to this movie that I loved. First, they're auditioning for a movie while making a movie.
Right.
There's the set is minimal, so we've already broken that fourth wall in the best way. Like we reference the fact that this is also it's the filming of a hypothetical scenario where these people are auditioning for a film.
Right.
And then of course the interplay of how he struggles with his own. This at one point was never like a stage show, right? Like a theater production.
It wasn't. I mean, I have a kind of, I started in theater, kind of directing theater. And so I've always loved theater, but what I've loved about it the most is the process of rehearsing and spending a lot of time on the work itself. And that always frustrates me about filmmaking. You don't really rehearse that much. You rehearse blocking. You hope the actors come in really prepared. You might do read-throughs, but that process of working in rehearsal and discovering what is the movie, I thought, like, what if you made a movie like that and just filmed all of that? Because what you're watching is sometimes, okay, we're going to rehearse it. And then there's other times where we're like, let's run through it. But it all becomes it, right? So that's intentional as an effect of, am I rehearsing my personality? Am I performing myself? Am I getting ready for the performance? And it's also like a practical consideration of how do we shoot a movie in 10 days where we don't have a ton of time to rehearse because it's a labor of love and everybody's squeezing us in between a lot of things. And then, what do we do with all this rehearsal footage? Can't we just make use of it? Right. So the rehearsal becomes performance. It's like we're rehearsing for a performance, but we're also performing a rehearsal. Right. Because that was kind of going to be my next question too. Cause there's so much of the movie where I'm watching it and I have to actually do the double take. Like, are they actually arguing? Are they in character right now? And I loved that element because it was constantly making me question the motivations and whatever it was that they were arguing. And I'm interested, is like any of that, was it all rehearsed? Was it all written down, or was there a lot of that? No. In fact, a lot of it, listen, I wrote a script that was probably 75, 80 pages before we went into production, and we were rewriting it throughout pre-production. But the kind of brilliance of my producing team was that we found ways to continue to write it as we were even shooting it. We introduced, my producer Sarah Salovitz introduced this idea of, let's give them a bunch of quotes by political figures from Palestine, from Israel, from the United States, of things that they've said over the last 25, 30 years. And we just printed them out and put them on huge V-flats in the background. You actually see them in the film. And we told the actors, just pick anything you want and just weave it into your dialogue, if you think it makes sense. And some of the things that they were choosing were things that it sounds like this is something Arafat would have said, but it's actually something that Sharon said, right?
Interesting.
So we don't even know. And again, I didn't want to, we track it. We have a kind of annotated version of the script where we can tell, but we didn't even know who. It's the Israeli Juliano who might be sometimes saying things that Arafat or Mahmoud Abbas said, or the Palestinian Juliano who just uses a line that Sharon happened to have said at some point. There's been so so many switching of polarities, even within Israel around this issue for so long that there's a kind of arbitrary assignment to what people say. And so we were doing that in real time. So the script it's almost being rewritten every time we perform it. And there were actually times where, the producers and I would look at each other while they were getting heated about things, where I genuinely didn't know if it was like, should we cut? Is this are they actually are they fighting? Kareem Saleh, who played the Israeli Juliano, and Musa Kraish, who played the Palestinian Juliano, they'd known each other. They've known each other for a long time as actors and as, collaborators and friends and stuff. So they had a kind of comfort level with really pushing each other, and they really knew how to get under each other's skin. But there were times where I didn't know, like, is this really happening or are they performing? And there was just this knife's edge of, even we didn't know, right? But we just kept rolling until there was never a time where I had to say, okay, we really have to cut now. We would have to talk about things after the fact, right? We would have to kind of have conversations, but you get some of those conversations in the film, right? When
that's one of my favorite parts about it is like it's really hard. You can tell that this isn't, the fourth wall has been broken, and you can't
from minute
tell,
one.
yeah, from the get go, like it's broken, and I just love that you really can't tell what is scripted and what is actually occurring in that scene. This context makes it make a little more sense, but it's delightfully chaotic, first of all, and second of all, I feel like this movie is probably the most it offers the most grace and nuance to that conversation than just about anything else I've seen. Because everything else I've seen has either been a big Hollywood production, one side or the other.
Yeah,
they don't even really want to entertain what the other side is thinking.
Yeah,
and this is the first one. Even though this is a story about a single man, there's kind of like an identity of anyone in this, or just population as a whole. Like, you're kind of seeing the discourse of his own internal struggle with who he is, with who we
they're
are
having
as
it.
People,
Yeah, they're having it in real time. I mean, it's because each of the people involved with this film has a kind of biographical relationship to what is happening, right? So for me, I'm born in Israel. My grandfather's a rabbi, I was bar mitzvahed at the Western Wall. Yeah. So I'm coming from a place of an actual emotional attachment, while at the same time being, like anybody who's got a pair of eyes and can see the situation, very troubled, right? So that's the place that I start from. And I have these collaborators who each represent sometimes a particular viewpoint and sometimes the same kind of complexity. Adam Meir, who is an Israeli actor, played the public Juliano, who's kind of the mediation of a couple of these facets. He had very strong opinions and was very forthright about them, and wasn't like any Israeli, was not ashamed to tell you what his opinion was. That's what I enjoyed about having him around so much, is that he would keep it on balance, right? I mean, even I think even I was maybe too biased in the beginning of this, coming at it from a very, critical point of view, and had my actor say, what's missing is this kind of love. Like, what does it feel like to love Israel? Like, we're missing that, because that's legitimate. That's a legitimate experience that people have as an attachment, and we can't let go of that. So we were constantly negotiating these things in real time. It wasn't like I said, like, hey guys, we have to come off like this. It was just happening in the process of making it. And so we set out from the very beginning, to create something that presented the problem and the contradictory nature of what it means to be attached to a place emotionally, but be very concerned, with politically and socially what's happening on the ground. right? So we didn't want to offer a kind of reduced solution or something that's an easy reduction of something that's very complex, because I think the people that I'm in contact with and the people that I know, we live this nuanced experience, and that's not that's upsetting to people. That upset people during the making of the film and in the process of trying to get it out into the world through festivals. People wanted to be like, to know where we were, where we stood. That was a conversation I had many times. It was a conversation I had with musicians in the studio while they're recording music, saying, well, is this going to be at a Free Palestine rally? Because I need to know now. And I said, maybe if they invite us. I'm not against it, but I'm also not against it, screening at synagogues. Like, I want to have a conversation, and if you're not okay with that, it's okay. You don't have to work on it, right? But those are difficult. People wanted us to declare what we were. They still do, and we're leaning into the kind of the radical middle. Right, the non-extremist, place of criticizing extremism on all sides. There's plenty of it to go around, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Nobody owns that.
I this is something I've tried to explain to my friends at least since 2001 and 9/11 and the whole war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Terrorism is a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
Right? From one side to the other, both could be terrorists. If we look at the people who founded this country, to the UK, they were terrorists.
Right.
For sure.
It's a grenade. Like, people just throw it into conversations.
That's, I guess, kind of leading to my next point. It just goes to the polarized nature of society, especially now. Not to say that it didn't exist before this, but the internet has made it way worse.
For sure.
But the situation in the Middle East, just like any political situation at that scale, is nuanced. There are shades of gray. It's not black or white. And I think a lot of people these days, and especially with that topic, it has to get boiled down to black and white. And war is not that way. War is a fog.
Yeah.
The things that happened during that time, anyone anywhere in the world would be like, that's not okay. But we still do it. And it's like a human nature thing. So
yeah, the black and white is the thing that we kind of wear as a safety cloak. Like, it makes us feel safe that I know what team you're on, and that I can be on a team and talk to my people about the things, I just don't think that's realistic. I just think that's just sloganism. And I don't think that's how, I think the reality of it is much more nuanced, and it's much more difficult. And, I can be horrified by, the kidnapping of Israelis and the torture of Israelis. And it's horrifying, it's unrepresentably terrible. And at the same time, still be shocked and horrified at, the death and displacement of Palestinians on a level that is difficult to fathom. Those two things can be true at the same time. I refuse to let people bully me off of, having an actual understanding of the situation, because I have to just say, well, which side is it? I also recognize, and this is something that, my, colleague Sarah and I talk about all the time. I also understand just being able to say that is a privilege that a lot of people don't have, right? Yeah. So, I recognize that privilege. So I get that, some people can't say that because they'll lose their lives, or they'll be, cast out by their populations. And that's why it's such a difficult thing to be able to even say. And to make artwork about, I think that's what we set out to do. We did not set out to pick a side or offer answers, but I know that being able to say that puts us on a side. It puts us on the side of, human rights, which I guess is a side now. It didn't used to be a side.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I also feel that there's the team element is hilarious. I'm always telling that to people, especially with like American politics. It's like, it's just if you can't see that this is just a team game at this point, they just want you to, they're going to tell you whatever they want to get you on their side.
Sure.
I'm more of the mindset. In a similar way to you, I refuse to let people tell me how I should feel about something. I want to feel what I want to feel. I'm going to consume the information from both sides and make up my own opinion.
Right.
And I understand that that's a privilege that we have here in this country. And that's why I think it's important for people who are willing to entertain it while we still have it, that we continue to do it. This movie does a really great job of, I love movies that don't necessarily have the buttoned up resolution.
Yeah.
That movie, I'm going to walk away from that movie and I'm going to have to think about it. That's the kind of art that I want to consume.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's any, like, do you want people to come away with a certain understanding of who this person was, or reanalyzing their beliefs on the situation in the Middle East, or are you okay?
I mean, if they can be analyzed away, yeah. I mean, I think if if they can be analyzed away from extremism, sure, but really, Juliano becomes a vehicle for unpacking this, this kind of diamond-like structure of who he is and where he lives in the context of the world around him. And if people, when people say things to me like, I was, I hate to admit this, but I was a little bit confused during the film. I'm like, great, you got it. Right. That's great. You were confused. I didn't know who I was watching. I didn't know, I didn't know which guy was the Palestinian. I mean, we intentionally make them switch costumes on film. We give them different parts in the rehearsal. They each play, a different part in the scene that they are rehearsing. And in the beginning of the process, the way I cast the film is I cast 3 actors, and then we had a run through a table read where we read the script 3 times, and they each switched from one part to the other for each reading. And we filmed that, right? I have, probably another couple 100 hours of footage of other stuff we never even used. So I was trying to figure out, okay, well, who's going to be the right one? I knew these 3 actors were the actors. I just didn't know who's going to play which part. So even in the making of it, we didn't want to say, I'm going to assign the Palestinian to the Palestinian part. It ended up being that way because I think Musa was the only one who could dare to bring levity to that role, right? In a way that wasn't kind of caricaturish. I think he did that brilliantly. Like, we needed a little bit of levity. It's such a heavy subject, and Musa's a very funny person as a human being. So, in that respect, it was great, but like, we just didn't, with the exception of the director, who, was played by Salome Azizi, we didn't really know of the 3 Julianos who would be who. And that was intentional. Like, that looseness, like keeping it loose like that I like the slippage. The slippage was the point. And I think that's what confuses people sometimes because, people are hostile to not knowing what you think about something or what the film is supposed to tell it to feel at particular moments. This is what Hollywood film does really well. You know exactly what you're supposed to feel at every moment of the film with the music or whatever it's telling you. And when you don't make stuff like that, there's always a level of resistance. But the people who don't resist it are the ones I appreciate.
Yeah, sure. Well, that you're not necessarily making art for the person who wants. I guess that is definitely another question I want to kind of get into. But like, I'll save it for a second because I have this other thought too. So, public-facing Juliano at some point around the middle. They kind of, both of the other 2 Julianos are kind of referring to him as like America. He's like, playing both sides. Right. And I definitely saw that, and I mean, accurate. But then there's also a part of me that sees the director behind the glass as almost like America. Or any other outside influence, like poking the bear.
Well, she was British. She's British Iranian, right? So we did get lucky that, she happened to also be British because the British, have their own part in all of this, right?
Sure,
so,
absolutely, yeah.
and so she did have this kind of cold, distance to her that I think worked really well. But yeah, I think that, the public Juliano, who ends up wearing a gray suit in the beginning because he's in between black and white, right, becomes the kind of figure that's mediating between, is it this one or is it this one? I mean, really the public figure of Juliano Mer-Khamis, because he was a public figure. He was very kind of fashionable in kind of leftist, progressive theater circles of New York. As an activist, you wanted to know and be a part of. And I think he did some really great work by leveraging some of those relationships to make the Freedom Theater, known around the world. But I think that he's always negotiating in that, about how much of the Palestinian cause he can represent and how much he can leverage these relationships that he has, particularly because, he's Jewish and Israeli as well. Right. Those are all things that are a part of him. And I think that the idea of having it be a triptych of three of them, right? In the same way that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yeah, the big three. It also felt like a kind of echo of that. I mean, again, these things kind of reveal themselves as we're making the film. A lot of that is in there when I'm writing it, but you start to see it, and people they each brought something because they really, all of them cared deeply about this and had things to say. And so a lot of the things that they say are not scripted, right? They're just things that they say that are informed by who they are as people.
Their experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of them have really interesting experiences. All of them do.
Well, and there's also, like, we're looking at this one character, separated into the three states of his mind or periods of his life. But there's also like a fun meta-analysis of even yourself.
For sure.
Like you're writer, director, producer. You're juggling three plates while also telling this story, another layer of meta. And I'm just wondering, were there any moments of like deep self-discovery for you that don't necessarily have to do with the production of the movie, but came out of the production of the movie?
Oh, for sure. I mean, just the fact that I felt the safety to be able to say, I'm not capable of telling you what side I'm on because I do feel all of these things at the same time. I'm the director.
And that is valid.
That's valid.
Yeah.
And it can stop there. It doesn't have to go beyond that as much as people want to have that answer given to them. And again, I'm talking, I have family members, I have, colleagues. It's like, there's always a pull towards one. And I think that part of it, was a discovery for me to be like, it's okay for me to stay here because this is actually what I'm living. I can't tell you the answer beyond that. And that doesn't mean I'm not committing. We're not saying there's, great people on both sides. It's not one of those things. If anything, there's, short-sightedness and stupidity on both sides. Absolutely. That's harming human beings. So I'm on the side of not making dumb decisions about human lives. So I think that came through the process of seeing like that we can discuss this and we can argue and we can disagree. And then we can go home at the end of the day and start the next day anew and be okay with it. Even through the process of, trying to publicize the film or, we were showing the film and, at the Warsaw International Film Festival on October 9th. I can't remember.
Wow.
It was like, and it was that, like, we were flying on October 7th and one of our actors, was like, I don't know what's going on and I don't feel safe just flying to Europe right now. Like real, legitimate experience, actual concern. And when we got to Poland, it looked different. We got to Warsaw, it looked different. There were a lot of cops on the streets. There was a lot of, there was a kind of presence that wasn't there a week before because of all of this. So it was a real conversation that people were having, and we felt committed to continuing. People were very open to the dialogue, but again, I think even something like that reduces people to a place of having to pick a side right now because this terrible thing has happened. Yeah, absolutely. There's no arguing, that October 7th is a unrepresentably horrifying thing and that people should never be treated that way, right? I mean, of course. But I still think that it's still important for us to allow these kind of multiplicity of voices and concerns to be heard, and even if it doesn't give us an answer. I didn't want to give the audience an answer. I wanted them to just say, wow, I didn't know all of that. And that makes it a little more difficult to just commit myself to this thing. You can still go back to your answer, but if we at least open that up for you for 90 minutes, it's not an easy film to watch, right? It requires your attention. You aren't told, this isn't the kind of thing you can be scrolling and reading the whatever your news feeds at the same time as you're watching. And I think that was always a challenge with this. It's getting people to pay attention.
You know, there's so many aspects of humanity that puzzle me. And, you know, I would hope that we could some point in the future figure out a way to all live harmoniously, but I have also accepted that we're just all not going to get along, you know? And
we haven't.
Yeah, right.
Historically,
history will show us that we just can't. We keep arguing over the lines that we draw in the sand. And, you know, I'm interested, is there any... We kind of already talked about it, and it's, again, we're not trying to tell people what to think here, but is there any element of, with any good art, how I always look at it is, did it make me think? I don't want stuff that's going to tell me how to feel. I want stuff that's going to unsettle me, that's going to make me think about it, because that is where I find the nuances in my own life. It's what opened my eyes to my own layers of ignorance that I'm still unpacking, that we're all unpacking. What do you hope is the big win from doing this? I mean, even the timing of when you guys, because this movie has been in the works for a long time. It's not something that happened in the past 2 years.
For sure.
Is there some kind of like a sign from the universe that like maybe this is the right time to put this out there? And
we said this. I mean, again, we started this project in 2021, right? We were saying this every 6 months, like, oh, wow, this is really relevant. Have we missed our chance because we're not done with production yet? I mean, the sad, unfortunate truth is that this has been at the forefront of people's thinking for decades, for sure, but at the forefront of, I'd say, everyday people's thinking for at least the last couple of years,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the people that didn't have an awareness of what's happening in the Middle East, in the minutia and the details, didn't have an awareness of it, for so many years, at least in the last few years, have paid attention to something, right? But I think very often what they're paying attention to is, what's the quick download you can give me about like what's going on, like what? Okay, so they do this and they say this, and I think what we were hoping is that a film like this could open that kind of conversation up to the multiplicity of contradictory things that are happening that have to be understood. Anybody who's lived it and lives there, or works there, or is involved, has family there, they talk about it with this kind of multiplicity, right? There are plenty of Palestinians with a lot of who have Israeli friends in Israel, right, who can still have real disagreements about that, right? So these are people that live amongst each other, whether we like it or not, who, for this moment right now, we're in a kind of moment of extreme polarization about it. So I've envisioned this film and the creative team that made it is really kind of being in a place in the center, trying to kind of punch out towards all the extremism, to just open up a space for being reasonable, and having an opinion that was complicated enough to require nuance, and just hold that. I mean, all we were working towards is creating a safe space where we could do that. So maybe the film becomes a kind of safe space for having that conversation, because we have the privilege of being able to do that without, jeopardizing our lives. I mean, at least some of us, right? I'm sure there are possible consequences for being involved in this film that I haven't, recognized yet, or, hopefully nothing terrible, right? So what I'm saying is I wanted us to be able to create that kind of safe space for conversation and have other people have an opening for that, because we were offering alternative points of view about the length of this history. I mean, the depth of this history, the complexity of the contradictory nature of this history. I think anybody who studied it understands that. And what we're seeing right now is kind of retreating into these silos. And I think that's not just happening. And I think that was also a conversation we were having. That's not just Israel and Palestine. right? That
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
retreat into sides is something that we're living here and is happening in Europe. And, so it was relevant in that way as well. But the part of where Israel is relevant and Palestine are relevant, that just didn't go away anytime in the last 4 years. We always were saying like, well, this is really the right moment, right? I think that after October 7th, it became more difficult for people to be open to this kind of conversation for obvious reasons. And I think we're getting maybe to a place now where people are having a little bit more of those conversations. But it was never easy for this film. You know, there was never a time where a festival was like, we have to show it. It was always, you know, the film was kind of making its way through festivals at the same time as some really reactionary things were happening around films like Jihad Rehab, which was a film that was supposed to be at Sundance and then got pulled because of issues that people had. But just the subject matter, it just people didn't want to, they just would rather not touch it.
Yeah.
Right. And that hasn't changed. Right. It's changed. Maybe we got distribution. I think that is a phenomenal success that a film like this could even get distribution. So many films that are made about this subject don't ever see the light of day.
Sure.
Right.
What was there, would you say there was like a noticeable difference because America's kind of its own level of ignorance. Was there like a difference in the reception here as opposed to elsewhere in the world?
Well, the places that we would end up going here, you know, the festivals that we would end up going here, for the most part, you know, are very often around like the university towns, right? So it's a different level it's a different population of people in terms of how informed they are. But absolutely, there were different conversations that were happening in Europe that were perhaps less guarded. Right. That could be more kind of openly critical of the political landscape and how, you know, Israel had arrived at this place. Right. And here, I think, I was surprised, even in like, you know, Omaha, you know, film festival, we had people who were very open-minded about it and said, you know, we can see with our own eyes what's happening. So that was surprising. But I do think in Europe, people have a more, maybe informed understanding of the history.
Well, they themselves have a lot more history.
Right. Period. They have more history.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny that you say that about Omaha. I used to live in Lincoln in Nebraska. It's about an hour south of Omaha. And outside of those cities, it's very country, very farm, old school farm life. But in those cities, they were both surprisingly, there isn't a lot going on out there. It's flat. There's corn. Right. There's a lot of corn. So when movies come through, like even in Lincoln, there was an independent film theater. Like no business being an independent film theater in Lincoln, but
there's enough people, right?
Yeah, they needed something to do. They really wanted the entertainment. But it is funny that you say that, how like even literally gridlocked in the center of the country, that people can kind of get to a point where they can maybe look at this situation with a little more nuance. It just can't be boiled down to a 60-second TikTok video. And so much of our society now is like, if you can't make your argument in 15 seconds, I'm swiping up.
I don't know what that's going to do to us, but it's not good so far.
It ain't good. You know, there's that, even the internet itself, like that is so prone to all sorts of manipulation from all different kinds of parties. I see a lot of the toxic behavior that goes on around these topics. And it's hard for me to look at it turning into anything other than violence elsewhere.
Right.
But I really, you know, again, with a film like your film, it creates this space where you can look, and again, you don't have to be right. At the end, you can be still just as confused as you were going in. But
it's better actually. It's better if you are confused, because then it means you've considered something outside of your silo, and now you're, you know, there's a kind of crisis which might lead to something really interesting. I mean, we know that the internet is rotting our brain. We know that social media is doing these things to us, and yet we can't stop it. You know, like we know, I know that, you know, the chicken nuggets are bad for me, but I just keep eating them. Like, this is chicken nugget information. It's been engineered to taste really good, right? And so that's the thing that's so surprising is it's not like a gotcha, like somebody's telling you it's bad for you and therefore you will stop. It's that I know it's bad for me and I can't stop. And I think we're all suffering from that, and what that does to therefore in that environment, I do need you to give me a 10-second, idea and have it be distinct and memorable. And that's why I think we kind of create these silos, because it's easier, it's easier to farm that outrage into dollars than it is to farm nuance into dollars. It just doesn't work. It's like,
well, I mean, the algorithms are literally designed. Like, there was a whole Facebook thing a couple years ago where the posts that induced the most rage got the most comments and generated the most ad revenue. So Facebook was pushing stuff that was salacious and rage inciting.
And do we think they're not doing it anymore? I mean, I feel like
it was part of the design from the beginning. No. It's like it's a commercial enterprise. It's not so that we can remain connected. We can remain connected using it, but from like the corporate perspective, that is a money-making enterprise. So, I mean, we know
the difference. I think people of a certain age know the difference.
Well, we lived life before that.
Right. But
we're
then
we're the last people, that know what that was like.
The people who are, I think, 20-year-olds now or teenagers now, it's like they don't even have the memory. They don't have the sense memory. I can tell my attention span has been fragmented into shards, right? I know what I'm missing out on. And I know that if I want to have a deep thought, I have to turn all that stuff off for a few weeks before a new thought is generated in my psyche. But what if you don't even know what that feels like?
What if this is the baseline?
Yeah, this is the baseline. That's scary. I don't know where we go from there, but
it is. Well, it brings me, I bring up this documentary a lot, and I think you'll love it. It's called We Live in Public. It was made in like the early 2000s. And it was about one of these guys, Josh Harris, who was like a major player in, the .com boom, the original .com boom, made a ton of money. And so he started to do this like social experiment thing. And he booked out this building, bought this whole building in Lower Manhattan. That documentary is fast. You'd love it.
Right. And so it was they was just people living 24/7. Is that?
Basically, he was going to have them live in this house, this building for a year. It was 100 people. And he would pay for food. He gave you drugs. You could do all sorts of crazy, like he had a CIA interrogator that you could sign up to be interrogated by.
Awesome.
They had a gun range, which in New York is really unhinged. That's really hard to do. It only lasted 30 days because people started getting violent. But the caveat was that he was going to film everything and he would own the videotape.
Okay.
And basically what he gets from that experiment is the internet is going to come out, social media is going to come out, we're going to love it at first, everyone's going to get their Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame, but then it's going to turn on us, and we're not going to know who we are, we're not going to know who the people that we're around are, and we're all going to be vying for clicks and look at my screen over looking at this screen. And he was doing that in the 90s, late 90s.
Do you think he knew that before? Or do you think the documentary is what showed him that? Or did he have that?
I think one of the reasons he doesn't have a problem abandoning it after 30 days is because he already saw it.
Right.
And they kind of talk about it in the documentary. Like he realized that this was a bad thing and there's just about nothing that he can do about it. And that, it was only going to lead to jealousy and violence and within this contained biome. But it's a fascinating documentary. And that documentary came out in 2008, I think, which was right before Facebook and Instagram becomes what it has become. But it's like, in my opinion, it's one of the few things that really, I mean, that guy started the first internet radio station. He started the first streaming. It's like dial-up streaming video.
Right.
He really was. He was peering into the future. But no one listened to him. And that documentary, like, it's kind of hard to find now. I'm sure you can find it on the internet somewhere.
Yeah. I see it. I mean, I'd love to see it. I mean, it's like that was the first .com bubble, right? It was like people all went bust because it was too early. And of course, it all came true anyway. Yeah,
it's really weird. I guess that leads me into the next question is like, contrary to popular belief, Jared Kushner is not solving problems in the Middle East.
Right.
What is there a solution? Not only is there a solution to that specific example, but then is there a solution to like the larger problem of just humanity constantly being warlike?
I mean, it's very hard. It's obviously an impossible question to answer, and it always seemed to me futile to hear people say, well, if we just talk to each other and start a dialogue, or, I heard a lecture with Judith Butler back in the day when I was in grad school talking about kind of binationalism in Palestine and Israel, and talking about how artists and academics were the ones that kind of had to lead the way to these conversations. That's a very hard thing to say to somebody whose home is being bulldozed, is,
Right.
Make
Or
some
whose
art.
whole family has died. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems, it seems inept and futile to suggest those things. I don't necessarily have other tools, right? So for me, opening up the discourse and letting people engage with, projects like this and having dialogues and conversations, that's all I know how to contribute. I don't necessarily believe it's going to solve anything or it's going to solve everything, right? So I don't know, but I do know that, people senselessly displacing human beings, displacing Palestinians senselessly, kidnapping and taking people hostage and torturing people, whether they are Israelis or Palestinians, is unacceptable. And I'm never not going to say that in a forthright way. And if that puts me on some side, then you can assign me to whatever you want. But I have to start with the basic stuff, like universal human rights. Like I have to start with that, and declare what those things are. I think that there are parts of the world where you can't even declare that anymore. Yep. So, maybe what artists are here for is to kind of maintain the record, of what are the important things that are non-negotiable, in the world that we live in. Does that mean I have an answer? Absolutely not. I mean, I'm stunned, and I look at, what we're dealing with here, and I look at how it makes me react. What it does is it makes me retreat into my small world, right? Into the like everyday things that I can do, which is raise good children. And I'm, a university professor, have these conversations with, you can't hide this stuff from, 19 and 20-year-olds. They are unsettled by the world. So we can't.
And rightfully so.
Yeah, we can't sloganeer them to, compliance with one side or another. They're just not buying it. Right? They just look at you as if you're just a relic that needs to be, removed from the conversation because you're not experiencing the world in a way that they're experiencing it. So the conversations have to happen. Otherwise, I think it makes us sick. And I see them. They're kind of sick with anxiety about like, how do I go into a world that doesn't seem to be reflecting who I am as a human being anymore? So I don't have the big answers. I've found only the small solutions in the kind of, close quarters of my family, or the, little world that I have where I'm teaching or working, collaborating with people. And that's about it. I don't have a better answer for that. I really don't. What can you say about the world?
And again, there is no perfect answer for that. That is a pure exploration of, most people won't even ask themselves that. Just being willing to come to with the same thing with the movie, come to a conclusion that's like, I don't know. I still don't know.
Right.
But, most people it's uncomfortable to think about those things. So most people, we design our lives in a way to completely
and I don't know.
ourselves.
I don't know is an okay answer if it's informed, right? It's probably not an okay answer if you're ignorant, right? And I think that's it. Maybe I could just get people from ignorant, I don't know, or ignorant side to informed, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or even an informed side. They like you can't convince people of what they don't want to be convinced of. So, but you can't give up. I don't know what the other answer is. Just give up and don't try anything. And I don't see that as a feasible outcome. So I just keep trying, regardless of whether I think it's making a difference or not. It just, otherwise, what do you do?
Well, you spiral into depression, or you
Right.
you.
So
end up in these,
I'm
like,
choosing
really
not to do
negative-
that.
Yeah, 100%.
I would like to choose that.
And again, like putting a creation like this out in the world, that is what you can do, and you did it. You know, I'm a music person, and I have a grand despise. I hate war pig leaders, and I look all around the world, and that's just what we have. Like
Right.
these selfish, ignorant people that get to the top, and it's all about money. Life doesn't matter.
Right.
And I've hated that, and I've always battled with myself. Like, well, what can I do? Like
Right.
protesting that can only do so much. I'm not trying to bomb a building. Like
Right.
I don't
Right.
think that's right either.
Right.
So I lean into my music, and I say what I think, and I process my emotions through that and put that out in the world. That's all I can do. And, you know, as simple as that is, like,
I think it helps. I mean, it helps
does.
also to find other people that are willing to, you know, have those kinds of conversations in that way. I think I got very lucky with, my team and, you know, my producer Braxton Pope, who's made a career of working on difficult films, and never, you know, kind of turning away from that call. And Sarah Salovitz, who is also, you know, both of these people, like they kind of lean into the difficulty. So I think having a group of people, even, you know, whether it's my editor or my DP, all these people who are willing to say like, yeah, let's have this difficult experience together. I mean, I had camera crew who were there, you know, because they wanted to be. They were like, I have another gig. I leave at 7 p.m. and then I shoot all night at this job that, you know, that pays me money on whatever, a reality TV show in some cases. But they would come back because they were like, this is because we want to, I want to be a part of this. So to me, you know, finding those collaborators is the key. And I think musicians, you know, filmmakers, whatever that is, it was always, awesome to find people who wanted to have the conversation together.
Well, and history will inform us that is art's role, really. You know, it always has been. And, you know, I am of the mindset that more people should do it for that exact reason. Like, you learn so much about yourself. Then, of course, like you're saying, if you're lucky to find people that you collaborate with, there's nothing like that energy. There's no drug you can take. Yeah. When you get into a room with a couple people who, like you were saying before, maybe they don't see a clear enough vision, the same clarity and vision that you see about what is at the end of that road, but they're willing to trust you and offer their insights. I don't know. That to me is like what life is worth.
They trust each other. And then you make something that you don't expect.
It's
that's
greater
the
than
key.
the sum of its parts.
Totally.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think with music as well, like you think it's going to be one thing when you set out to do it, and then, you know, it becomes alive in the making of it. And I think, you can't do that with everybody. You have to do that with people who are willing to let go of complete control. And I think that's what good collaborators do. It took me a long time to figure that out, right? Just to let it go a little bit and don't be so attached to the outcome. You know, how do you work like that all the time? That's the question.
Well, not well with others. That's for sure.
Right.
And we've all been on a creative team with somebody who doesn't understand that. And that's, you know, we immediately know the difference if this job is, even if it's a hard thing that we're trying to do, it's not going to feel like it's hard because we're all here giving it.
Usually it's a kind of function of how much money is on the line and who controls the money. And thankfully in this situation, we were in control of that. So I think we could take that out of the kind of immediate pressure. But I don't know. The next one might not be like that, you know, because the money is really what determines that. If it's somebody giving you a lot of money to make music or make a film, you know, they're going to have an opinion.
Yeah.
And usually it's based on, a lot of times it's based on their side, whatever side, you know, like that's why they got into it, because they made a lot of money doing something else. And now they have a side to protect. Right.
What was editing like? Because you're saying there's like cameras and cameras and hours. What was editing this thing like?
Well, the funny thing is that I had two editors, Alex Tyson and Ben Shern, at different times. One who kind of got us started, and Ben who kind of saw the film through completion. And the funny thing is that I was actually the assistant editor for my editor.
Love that.
Because I was the only person who could look at 250 hours of footage and know exactly what was happening in that moment. Because there were looks or size or the way he said a line. And I remember being on set thinking, that's it. And so that was really funny, is having to kind of be the one that catalogs all of that stuff. But it took almost 2 full years to edit the film. Sure, because we made the film we shot it in July. We had a gallery exhibition of a 30-minute portion of the film in October. So there was a lot of and that was basically the first act of the film, as you see it, was this exhibition piece. And then we spent another year and a half trying to edit the rest of the film. And what's interesting is that we edited the script as written, meaning beginning to end. We did this assembly, and we, and it just wasn't there. It's like a 3-hour version of it. And well, that's exactly what I wrote, but it's not that interesting. And then I would, tell the editor, okay, let's start to mix it up and just try different things and make it nonlinear. And that's when it became really interesting. But getting 250 hours of footage down to what it ended up being 98 minutes was really excruciating, because there's so many things in there that I thought, I can't let that go. There were times towards the end of the process where I would talk to Ben, our editor, and say, you know what, just take some stuff out and don't tell me. I don't want to know. And if I don't, because I'm going to argue everything. I'm going to pick a fight about every single frame that you decide you're going to remove, because I think it's all great. And of course, my producers would just be like, look, this has to be shorter. Braxton and Sarah were very good about that. And Braxton would say very little, but when he did say something, he would say it was important. So he'd be like, yeah, you gotta cut 18 minutes out of it. So to tell the editor, okay, cut 6 minutes and don't tell me, but just keep them aside because I'm going to ask about them. Just because I was I wasn't ready to let them go completely. But I would miss things, and I'd say I missed this reverse shot that you took out, and he'd be like, God, how'd you pick that one out? But we got there, and hard choices were made. There's a couple other films in there that I could, craft in a different way. But it just took a really, really, really long time, right? It just was a lot of fine tuning and taking out little spaces. And, your audience, as it turns out, we know audiences are much smarter than we give them credit for in terms of how astute they are as film watchers. And if they get ahead of you, you're done for, right? So how do you stay just far enough ahead of them to keep them interested and engaged, but not so far ahead of them that they're just like, all right, I give up. This is too much. I do that all the time. I can't it's very hard for me to sit and watch an entire film without being distracted at some point. I went to, going to a film festival is a great experience for a filmmaker. Sit in a room and watch a program of 15 short films. And notice when you start looking at your watch, it's 3.5 minutes in, right? And you're watching 20-minute films that you think oh man, when's this going to be over? So I think we get it faster than an audience has time to, faster than And I think when you're editing a film, you have to edit with that in mind, which is why when we finally made this turn into the kind of nonlinear structure of this, where you really start to break things up, and they don't, you forget about continuity. A scene that was 12 minutes now becomes 2.5 minutes, because your audience they get it. They put it together. The stuff that's happening for them to put it together is kind of the point. And I think that is something you overlook when you are really precious about every little beat of it. Just took a long time, though. I got to say, I'm surprised because really, I think when we finally finished it, that's the film I wanted to make. Ben nailed it, and I was like, "Wow, Ben and Alex, you guys nailed it! That's it. We got there. It took so long. I can't even tell you how many edits we have of this."
Well, as it should, and this is for people who aren't familiar with the process of making a film. It's long been alluded to that the editor is a very important piece of that.
Absolutely.
You don't see them. Their awards aren't usually on TV, but they're super important. And that is just as much what can make a film as compared to who's in it and how good the acting was and how good the cinematography was.
There's no film. I mean, there was no film until it got edited. I mean, really, I know what I thought I had, but really until we've, finessed it, the difference between absolutely not there to there is just so small. And to get to hit it was really, really hard with this one. And I still, there's a part of me that imagines going back and finding the other versions of this for exhibition or something. But, there's also part of me that's like, I want to move on. It was a lot.
We're
5 years of work. We're done. It's okay to be done.
Well, I think that's honestly, you're bringing up probably the thing that I had to get over the most is stop tinkering.
Right.
There's a point where this is done, and anything I do beyond this is actually going to start to hurt the project than it is going to help it.
Well, you can't tell at some point. You stop being able to tell. You're like, I can't see. It's like I'm blind now. I need months away from it. That's why I think it's really valuable to keep, it's like the red teaming thing of when you're creative is you keep somebody who hasn't seen it in any way for the very end. Keep a few of those people in your life, because once they've seen it, they're just in the pipeline of like revisions, but just to get a clean read on something is very hard, and to stop tinkering, because you don't even know if you're doing something that's good.
There was one line, it might be the last line in the movie, and I'm going to butcher this, but it was like, I don't want to teach them about history. Can you kind of say the line so it's not me messing it up?
I think it was something, I don't remember the exact line, but it was like, I would rather teach them the history of the future instead of the history of the past. History of the past. And it's I'm pretty sure it's Shimon Peres who said it at some point. And, in the saying of it, there's a lot of things going on, because on the one hand, you could say, well, of course you don't want to teach anybody the history of the past because it doesn't really look so good. Right. And therefore there's this question of, needing to let go of the past in order to move into the future. And again, with trauma, because there's trauma on all sides, enough to go around for everybody. But I do think that one of the things about trauma is that at some point, even if you've processed it in its entirety, there's a moment where you just have to let it go in order to survive. It's like kind of willfully forgetting something so that you can just move on. So there's a part of that in what he's saying in that specific moment, right? Which is, in order to move forward, we have to let this go. And this has been a part of so many political projects that are about looking at the future. Every society that deals with, trauma or, mass, they always have to figure out how do you do it? Is it putting the people who've done the horrible things in front of the people that they have done the horrible things to, that's like truth and reconciliation. Does that actually work? Right. So what is it that allows us to move forward? Because if we're just recounting the trauma and who did what to whom and keeping score, I understand that everybody deserves to be heard, but at some point it's impossible to move forward.
Yeah, it's just eye for an eye kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it doesn't help. So I think there's some of that in what Shimon Peres is saying, which is that sometimes letting go is necessary for moving forward. Now that can be read problematically, of course, because if you are perpetrating terrible things on other people, of course you want to let it go so that we can move forward. And if you're having those things perpetrated upon you, it's very hard to just let it go and move forward. But sometimes I think it's necessary to move forward, right? So I think there's all of that stuff is kind of wrapped up there, and this kind of really brilliant performance that Kareem gives of that final monologue, because he doesn't really give you a sense of, are you saying this in the good way or in the bad way? Like, what is the good way and what is the bad way? It's fraught with all of that. And it's amazing to have human beings who can create that. Right.
Well, and there's even like an element, and I'm not going to be able to ideate this correctly, but like, there's an element of that quote that's like, we can't build a better future or a different future if all we're doing is looking at how terrible we've been. If we want, this is how humans are. And if we want to be different, we have to approach and think about it and approach it in a radical way that has not been done yet, because every other way we've tried has ended up like this. I don't know. I thought that line was the perfect way to kind of wrap up what that story is.
Absolutely.
And again,
it's also troubling because, tell that to somebody who's been aggrieved, erasing the history that they can know is there. That's not the answer either. Like, that's not what we're talking about, right? So it can be misconstrued in a lot of unfortunate ways, but there's still something about a little bit of like just letting it go to move forward that is implied that I think is necessary, even if it can be very troubling in the way that it's done, right? Because again, I think all these things can be taken into different contexts and made put to the service of one agenda. And that's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about like this thing that happens with trauma that sometimes the only way to get past it is to just choose to get past it as a choice. And that's, again, how do you even say that to people who have been aggrieved in this way?
Exactly. It's a very hard choice to sell someone on. Yeah. Anyway.
So the words almost seem empty when he's saying it, but at the same time, they're very loaded. I don't even know, I don't know what's happening in that moment, but it's pretty magical in the film.
Yeah, I really did. I love that that's kind of how it buttoned up. And it just kind of like, even from that quote, it continues the uncertainty of it all,
Right.
Getting close to the end here. I want to make sure I also hit this too. What are you cooking up? Anything else? You got any new projects in the works?
I've got a bunch of things. I mean, the thing that I'm most curious about right now, which I'm not, I can't talk at length about, but is a kind of experimental psychedelic espionage thriller that's informed by things like MK Ultra, set in a bipolar fascist democracy, made with hopefully with movie stars and AI and live action. So I have an idea for something, and I'm really just kind of throwing myself into a lot of research that I know you're very familiar with, just from listening to the podcast. I've actually learned a bunch of stuff that I'm like, kind of chasing and researching, but I think, I'm again interested in this moment. Everything for me starts from a kind of relationship of history to contemporary experience, and then gets rooted in like, what am I interested in beyond that? I can't make work that's I don't know how to make things that are outside of the times that we live in. So for me, this is a way of processing stuff. So that's kind of, I'm in the research phase, and the research phase for my last one took years and years and years. So who knows when that'll come to fruition, but I'm very interested in it and how to kind of spin this out. And I'm interested in the way that, people are, talking about AI as a tool in filmmaking. I'm not ready to just be dismissive and scared of it. I think it's an interesting tool that put in the right hands could be as effective as other tools, but is still just a tool, and helps us imagine things, hopefully for independent filmmakers that, make things easier to execute.
100%. Yeah. I'm of the same mind, that everyone has their camps on AI, but people said the same thing. I've witnessed this once, and it was when digital audio came around,
right?
And everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is going to destroy everything. But what it ended up doing was making recording much more accessible to literally anyone that wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And I kind of see, I've got a bunch of buddies who have been negatively impacted, visual effects artists, editors.
Absolutely.
But they're also the same people who are like, well, I want to use these tools because I see, in my opinion, something like that is just going to save people thousands of clicks. When all the hype wears down, when these tools have integrated into the software that we use, what they're really going to do is save us thousands of clicks and give people the ability to generate well beyond what they themselves are capable of.
Yeah, it's a superpower, but you still have to have the kind of creative impulse and a vision behind it. I mean, there is no doubt that lots of people are losing their jobs. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's impossible to see a different way that this technology gets taken up. Visual effects, recording engineers. I mean, like you can just see at every layer, and that is a very unfortunate part of this kind of transition. And the question is what's on the other side worth it? I don't know, but I'm definitely interested in the tools, and I know that it's still, transitions are always transformative, and it's not always a good thing for people on the ground. So I'm very aware of that, but I also know that we're not going to stop it by, in the history of technology and the uptake of technological innovation, the Luddites never win. Like people who resist it. The people who resist it are the ones who, we're still listening to radio and we're still going to the theater.
Right.
That didn't disappear, but it definitely, was reduced to economically and kind of not totally significant part of the economy in the way that it was. But there's still a lot of money going into podcasting. There's still a lot of money going into internet radio. There's still a lot of those things don't go away. They just get transformed. And the transformations are not, those are not always, they're not good for everybody. And so I'm aware of that. I don't even know what to say about it. Oops, sorry. I don't even know how to contend with that for people that are in it. But as a filmmaker, I'm happy that there's a new tool to use, and I know that my creative vision is necessary. It's that the process is still painstaking.
Yeah, right.
Like there's still a lot of work,
sleepless nights and blood, sweat, and tears.
All the tools are there, but it's like they're not perfect. The precision is not. It's not like, oh, make me a feature film about blah blah. That's not how it works. So I still think it's just a new tool. Now, whether you think it's revelatory or just rehashing old ideas, that's really where a big part of the debate is.
Yeah, and it absolutely is a concern. What they're using to train the LLMs. I mean, of course, all the stuff in Hollywood over the past couple of years of writers and actors saying, I don't want my name and likeness used. I don't want the studio pumping out AI scripts. All of those are valid concerns. And to be honest, I don't think anyone will ever prefer AI art that was like completely AI. That's art. That's art that's trained on our art, and it's made for computers by computers.
Right.
I think there will ultimately be some kind of happy middle ground that we find in integrating these tools. I don't think any filmmaker, I definitely know no audio engineer who refuses to use digital.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it just makes it easier. You don't have to care to tape the film and develop it, and it opens up a lot of flexibility that you couldn't have with. It doesn't take away the charm of a movie made on film. I just had my buddies on here. They made like a little short film in France on film.
Right.
And they couldn't wait to get it digitized.
Right. I know.
Like
Makes it really easy.
on film was like this whole pressure, and they're just like, they were down to like, 10 minutes left of all the reels that they bought.
It's so hard to finish a film on film. It's almost impossible. I don't even know who would help you do that. Right? It's done. There are a few people who do it.
Very few people. Yeah. And again, because of that, it's created new jobs that didn't exist before. And then also, I think it's just also a part of like creative fields in the modern age. We have to be learning. Like we have to be constantly developing the skill. It's not something that we get a degree for or understand at one point in our life and we just stop learning or growing from it,
Yeah.
And AI is just an extension from that. When the hype dies down, I can almost guarantee it's going to enable people that do it to do it better, and enable people that couldn't do it before to be able to do it.
Yeah. I think the thing we haven't figured out is, what do you do with all those jobs that you could get as a youngster coming out of school to learn that stuff that actually will get eliminated, realistically, that won't be available anymore. So what does that learning curve become? Because, the thing with AI, everybody's saying it's always going to eliminate no joy work. Well, no joy work is work that sometimes people learn from. And so that issue too is, it's not such an easy thing. I know just as a creator, I'm curious and I'm playing with the tools, not as a way of replacing everybody, but as a way of augmenting it. The human in the loop part to me is essential. You can't, you can't, take the human being out of it, even though I know we're talking about some time horizon where, artificial general intelligence can train itself and it doesn't need us. I think that stuff we have to figure out as a civilization. How do we deal with copyright? How are we going to reward people for actually having created the stuff this stuff is being trained on? I think all that stuff is legitimate. But purely as a creative person, I'm excited about it. I'm also excited because it gives people who have a very good command of words some autonomy back over how to create, right? And I think I'm happy about my language skills because it helps me talk to the AI, right? So I'm not gonna rule it out. And I'm gonna see how again, as an artist, I look at it as a medium, and the question is, how do I push this medium to its limit? How do I kind of find the cracks and the ruptures in the medium, just like I've tried to do that with a film that's really kind of a staged performance that's, theatrical and metacinematic and has many different levels. I'm trying to kind of break the convention of film. And so now the question is, well, how do you break the convention of AI? How do you make it the subject of its own undoing? So I think that's where the interesting stuff is. I don't know what happens to that work, but I do know that that's one way to pursue it, is to kind of push it until it starts to crack.
And it will. Just like all technology,
totally.
Especially in its emergent ages.
Totally.
And I personally, I look forward to that. I look forward to the people who are going to embrace it, because again, it will empower them to do something way different and cooler than they could have done
for sure
with a good team of trusted collaborators.
And we have to figure out all the kind of environmental costs. I mean, there's all this stuff that comes along with it that we have to deal with, and we're not good at having conversations before we jump into things.
yeah, we're exceptionally bad at that. Yeah.
We're like, let's figure it out later. But I think that's going to be a problem. Like that will, that's going to come back to bite us. But I don't have to solve that problem today.
Yeah, that's not for us. That's way above our pay grade.
Yeah.
But Michael, I want to thank you for coming on the show. This has been super fun. I hope the new project develops quickly, but not too quickly.
Right.
And once that's out, you've already piqued my interest with MK Ultra, so I'm right there on it.
Okay.
I'll be excited to see what that is when it comes out.
Fantastic.
Have you back on, and we can do another kind of meta-analysis of that one.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And everyone, check out the movie. Yes, Repeat No. Links to press and all of your work that I can find on the internet will be included in the description. So if you want to support check out Michael's stuff and support his work, it'll be on there. Otherwise, this has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch y'all on the next one.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The end. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. That's obnoxious. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. Literally no one cares. For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business, or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along, buddy.